Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the RTI and VR2 Recruiting Podcast. I told you we'd be back again this week, and we are. We're trying not to make you have to wait a long time again between episodes, so we appreciate you all tuning in again for another update on recruiting for Tennessee football. We talked a lot about basketball last week, too. Don't really have a whole lot of recruiting updates for basketball this week. We're going to make this a little bit probably shorter of an episode. But I am Nathaniel Rutherford, the managing editor of RocketTopInsider.com, joined this week by just Matt Ray of All Recruiting Reports. Last week it was just Brandon. This week it's just Matt. So one day, Matt, we'll have all three of us back onto the podcast. But I'm very glad you can join me this week.
It'll be quite the reunion. We'll have to get some Kentucky Fried Chicken and celebrate it, even though we're all not anywhere close to each other.
No, but maybe, you speaking of Kentucky Fried Chicken, maybe it'll be cause for celebration. Hopefully we'll get together before the Kentucky game, but hopefully that'd be a celebration for Tennessee beating Kentucky.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Weeks. We do have a lot to cover and not a whole lot of time to get there. So, Brandon, I want to talk, first of all, about some of the visits this past weekend Tennessee had. It was really their last big recruiting weekend of the year, at least for the season, because you have homecoming, which they do actually have quite a few people coming in this weekend, and we'll talk about that in a second, too. But you had a lot of your big in-state targets. You had a lot of guys who you've been targeting with Ayu Jones-Bell came in town as well, and he got to see Tennessee's best passing performance of the season. So he chose a very good week to come to see Tennessee. But of course, some of the big names getting attention that were here were the Jamari Thomas, Jay Hardy, Tyler Barron, those guys, and we've talked about them I don't know how many times on the podcast. But shortly after his visit was over, Hardy came out and said that he is going to announce his commitment on November 6th. He has pushed the time back to 8 o'clock in the morning, which I don't think that really changes anything about where he's going to go. Just, you and I were talking before we hit record. We think it's probably just TV stuff why he changed that. But he has four finalists. Tennessee is one of them, along with Florida, Georgia Tech. Matt, at this point in his recruitment, I would be, and with him making this decision fresh off his official visit to Tennessee, and he's only, I think, he's visited other schools too, but I think the only other official visit he's taken is to Georgia Tech. I feel pretty safe in saying that I think this will be a commitment to the Vols.
Yeah, he's taken an official to Georgia Tech. They really tried to turn up the heat there for just a little bit. They hosted him one weekend. The next Friday night, they were on the sidelines. Defensive line coach Larry Knight was on the sidelines to see him at a game that we were at when they played Knoxville Catholic. They were also there to see Tyler Barron because they were trying to stay involved with both of those guys, but they were really trying to, push on Hardy at that point. I don't think that really went anywhere. The one school that's kind of a dark horse in this entire thing right now, and talking with Hardy again yesterday or Monday after he announced that he was going to commit next week, is Auburn. Auburn's made a strong case with what they're losing on the defensive line, what they've been able to do on the defensive line. They're going to get Hardy down for an official visit this weekend as of right now. Let's see if that trip holds up or not. Mm-hmm. But as of right now, that is kind of one of the plans, is to get him down there this weekend. He's got a big game on Friday night. Innsworth comes to town playing against Keyshawn Lawrence, his second game back in action. So I would imagine he may make it down to the Plains, but we'll see what happens. But right now, Tennessee's got a lot of momentum. He spent a lot of good quality time with the coaches, he said. He enjoyed the visit. Talked to some people that know his family. His family enjoyed the visit, and Hardy really just enjoyed the bond with the in-state guys this past weekend. So that's going to take Tennessee a long way in this one, and I think they're going to be tough to overcome right now. Especially if you're a guy like me, I like to track visits when I look at stuff like this and get to know these guys. He's visited Tennessee at least 8 times, 9 times this year alone. So I think they're going to be hard to overcome, but we'll see. Anything could change. We'll talk about a guy's recruitment that changed pretty swiftly a couple of times, and then again just recently later on in the podcast. So anything can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious. You all talk to a lot of the in-state kids a ton. I mean, I think if you're talking about the ones you have the strongest relationships with, it's definitely the in-state kids as far as who Tennessee's recruiting, and you all have a good connection with the Marietta recruits down there too. What was your feel? I don't know if you had a chance to talk to Amari or Tyler or not, but what was your feel from them coming off their visits to Tennessee this weekend?
I'll start with Tyler because he's the shortest one. Didn't have any conversation with Tyler. Didn't reach out to Tyler. just for the simple fact that we may see him this week, and you just don't want to bombard guys, Um, I did have several people around me that saw Tyler around the stadium and that communicate with Tyler tell me that he thoroughly enjoyed the visit. He talked about it. So I imagine, like most guys, is a night game, a big atmosphere, a big win for Tennessee. Coaches, players, fellow commits that they're friends with were excited. So it was a good time. With Omari, that was all done pretty much via text. Omari's a tough guy to get on the phone. I would imagine most guys of his style of play, whatever you want to call it, his caliber, are tough to get on the phone, probably because he's on the phone with coaches a lot of times and everybody else. But Omari enjoyed the visit. He got his family up there. I think Tennessee made a pretty big move. Most of the guys that we talked to that are peer recruiting in this class right now, Omari has been one of the biggest targets for an extended period of time. And I think that's because he's probably right at the top of the board for Jeremy Pruitt and staff. So, there's about 5 guys that are interchangeable, maybe even more than that they really they feel like they have to get. And Thomas is one of those. So, he enjoyed the visit, got his family up there. Ole Miss is the school that Tennessee's battling. But I believe his sister attends Ole Miss.
Yes.
Don't hold me to that, but I believe his sister attends Ole Miss.
She does.
So that's kind of the thing that Tennessee's having to overcome, and he can be a feature player at Ole Miss too. But Jeremy Pruitt has led this recruitment for a while, and that's not going to change. And Jeremy Pruitt's a really good recruiter, and Tennessee made a big move out of the weekend. They have a chance to capitalize on that. And Thomas talked about right now signing or announcing at the All-American game, but I wouldn't be surprised if that timeline doesn't move forward a little bit, because it seemed, before it's been set in stone, it seemed a little bit more tentative. This time he was a little hesitant to say, like, no. He wasn't really sure. So I won't be surprised to see that timeline move ahead just a little bit, but we'll see what happens there. But Tennessee had a really good visit with Thomas, and it was a big step in trying to get him to Knoxville.
Well, that's very good news. We talked about him a lot in this podcast. He's a guy that can play really both sides of the ball. I know Brandon likes him more on one side of the ball than the other. He wants to see him more as an offensive lineman, but I think Thomas is a guy that can play either side. He might be a guy that, once he gets to campus, to kind of see where they have more of a need at that time and kind of where he fits that need more for where they kind of, if he, assuming he comes to Tennessee. If he doesn't, then obviously that doesn't matter. But if he comes to Tennessee, I think that could be the case. Yeah,
I've talked to several guys about this, and the thing about Dominic Bailey and Jay Hardy and Omari Thomas and even Octavius Oxendine is what you're seeing Jeremy Pruitt do on the defensive side of the ball. And you can see this defense has, if you've watched the games, you can see the defense has been leaps and bounds better than where they were at the first of the year, and they continue with that momentum. They shut down a pretty good South Carolina team most of the night. Mm-hmm. But Jeremy Pruitt is recruiting guys that were the face and still are the face of a Nick Saban style defense. That's what Jeremy Pruitt knows. But big, massive guys that could line up almost, they're so athletic and play tight end. Like Hardy and Thomas and Oxendine, these big guys that demand a double team and that can move. And he's going to try to wear defenses down. And I think that's why you'll see Thomas get at least his first look on the defensive side of the ball when he gets to campus.
Yeah, and plus with Pruitt, I just kind of I assume most of the time that if a guy can kind of play both ways, they're going to get a look on defense first.
I think so too. Yeah.
Just from experience with other guys that he's got on the roster, they tend to get looks at defense first, and I think the offensive coaches are going to start trying to put more of a fight, saying, "Hey, you can't take this guy from us. We want him on our side of the ball." I think that was one of the things you saw with Gerard Means, who came in. He only it was talked about that was a temporary move for him to go to defensive back, and then he's back with the receivers now, and I think T. Martin and Jim Chaney are happy to have him over there because he seems like he has, I think, quite a bit of potential over at receiver.
Yeah, I think so.
But we'll move on here, and we apologize we don't get to talk about as much as we want to. In this podcast, we're trying to keep it a little bit shorter. Matt and I both have stuff we kind of need to get done here as soon as this podcast is over. But we do. I think we'll try to. I don't know if we have time this week or not, because I know you guys are going to be busy on Thursdays and Fridays because of football games. But we'll try next week to do kind of a I think a mailbag question podcast next week.
Yeah, that'd be another good
questions because we hadn't done that in a little bit, and I think this would be a good time to do it. So we'll do that for next week. But moving ahead here in this podcast, Matt, one of the things we haven't had a chance to talk about was, when you get a big win over a conference foe, that's what you kind of expect. Good recruiting news, and you expect maybe commitments. What you don't expect is a decommitment from one of your top ranked recruits in your recruiting class. But that's what happened with Tennessee. I don't think it was, it wasn't because Tennessee did what they did. It was just the timing of it worked out for him because of his teammate. But of course, we're talking about BJ Ojulari. He decommitted from Tennessee over the weekend and flipped to LSU, the same school that 5-star tight end / wide receiver, not Rakeem Jarrett, but he is committed there too. But
he's committed there too.
Eric Gilbert, so I'm talking about from Marietta. They're both down in Marietta, obviously. Gilbert surprised a lot of people. Brandon and I talked about that a little bit on last week's podcast. He surprised a lot of people by choosing LSU over Alabama because that seemed kind of where he was going to go was Alabama. Then he chose the Tigers. Ojulari ended up following, and they're good. They're not just teammates; they're good buddies on the team too.
Yeah.
Following his friend and committing over there. Matt. It surprised me the timing of it, but at the same time it didn't. When we had the podcast not long after he committed, I think it was that same day he committed, we talked about LSU as a team that, they were trending for a while for him. It seemed like a kind of a surprise for a lot of people, and us, we were kind of surprised too up until it actually happened that he was going to commit to Tennessee. But obviously he's now changed that. Are you surprised at all they changed LSU? And then do you think this is over? Do you think this is a thing Tennessee could back into? And I'm just curious your thoughts on the whole thing.
That's going to be interesting to watch for a lot of reasons. So BJ announced on August 7th that he was going to commit, and I reached out that day. I was traveling across the country. I was in Colorado. I reached out that day, and just talking to him, and we were going to do a commitment interview. And at that time, things were just a little bit different. I've built a pretty good relationship with BJ. I've been down to Marietta so many times. A lot of those guys are used to seeing me, used to talking. We did the commitment interview that night, and the LSU chatter nationally never died.
Yep.
But we did the commitment interview for Tennessee. A little later on, we redid the commitment interview about 2 days prior to his commitment. We redid the commitment interview for the fact that it was LSU at the time we did the first one. I believe that was just a professional courtesy from BJ in a way to give me that interview just in case something did change. But then we were still communicating back and forth, and Brian Niedermeyer had changed the entire course of that recruitment. Mm-hmm. Brian Niedermeyer did not let Tennessee die. But LSU was really the school, I think, where BJ wanted to be, come into play. I don't think he wanted to go down there by himself, maybe. He didn't want to, spread his parents thin with Aziz at Georgia, him at LSU. But now all of a sudden, Eric's going down there. Eric shocks the world. I was there on that Wednesday night. He didn't tell anybody. He didn't tell his mom. He didn't tell his grandma, who was a sight to see that night, talking about not being able to understand Coach Orgeron. And it was really an enjoyable setting because he surprised not just, the media and the people that were trying to predict where he was going and the people that followed recruitment. He shocked his entire family. They were blown away. So I think, at the time, BJ's like, okay, Eric did this. That's where Eric's heart was. That's where my heart was too. He had a lot of loyalty to Tennessee because Tennessee really prioritized BJ Ojulari. Mm-hmm. And, I think it was just ultimately where he wanted to be. Do I think somebody can flip him? It's going to be tough. I really do think BJ Ojulari is a loyal kid. I think LSU is where his heart was the entire time. But, I know that raises different red flags, questions, comments from folks. But I think it's going to be tough to flip him. I think if anybody could, it'll be Georgia.
That would be. We talked about that before when he committed about the Bulldogs being the one team that would, or kind of one of the two teams to watch out for would be Georgia and LSU. And I agree. If Georgia ever does really pick up the heat on them, if I'm LSU, I would definitely watch my back on that one, because I think that would be the one team that I think for sure could do it. And maybe Tennessee does, maybe they don't. I just, I'm with you. I think that if he's going to flip, it'll be to the Bulldogs, not to back to the Vols. But now that, he's not part of this class, and it doesn't really seem like he's going to probably come back into this class, where does Tennessee go? I mean, there's the possibility. I think there's a possibility you could move one of the Whitehaven kids into that kind of that role that you had, Ojulari penciled into for your defense. I just don't know that any of those three are as good of a fit as what Ojulari would be into that role. And I know obviously the guys like the Jay Hardys and the Tyler Barons, they're strong side defensive ends. They're a little bit different of a role. Some of those guys could be turned into defensive tackles actually in this, just how big their frames and stuff are. So is there someone that Tennessee is targeting that you think could maybe take that spot, or is there someone that they already have committed they could transform into that role? I'm curious on your thoughts on kind of where Tennessee goes now that Ojulari is decommitted. And
so,
flipped.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very reasonable question to ask, because they have to go somewhere, without a doubt. Reggie Grimes is the first name that comes to mind. We talked about it off the record. Tennessee's, if they are pushing, they aren't letting anybody know that they're pushing for Grimes. It kind of seems like it's a pretty significant cold front there right now, but they hosted him for an official visit, so that's got to mean something in my opinion. But it just doesn't seem that they are making that strong of a push right now, and Oklahoma's becoming a major player. Brandon thinks South Carolina's dropped off. I don't really think that's the case, but he knows Grimes a little bit better than I do. Another name is Jamari Butler. Nathaniel, I know you interviewed him a little while back. He's a really raw prospect, but he's a guy that has only been playing football for a year, from what I can gather, and he's got a chance to be really special. Outside of that, they're going to have to really dig to see where they want to go in this class, because that's not a spot that they can afford to just come to take a project on. The option to put one of the Whitehaven guys there, I think, is a good possibility. But I don't know. I'm like you. I don't know how well they fit. I don't know who else they could kind of lean on to try to flip away from a commitment. The one name that comes to my mind was a guy that Tennessee pushed for a little bit, but then never really followed through on, is Deontay Craig he's from Indiana. At one point, there was chatter that Tennessee liked Craig more than any prospect on their board, but that obviously didn't end up, happening. So there's still some options out there for them. Gesine Davis is a guy that they offered late from Shiloh, Georgia. I'm trying to look back through my notes here and see what day they offered him. I can't remember exactly what day they offered him. It was in the last couple of months. He's committed to Wake Forest though, and he's a guy that Tennessee would kind of like to flip. So there's some options out there. It's just going to be getting one in. So
yeah, I'd almost forgotten about Butler. That's a good option. I know we talked off the record about Reggie Grimes, and that's just, to me, to kind of go on a little bit of a Reggie Grimes tangent here before we get to our last topic of the show. Grimes to me is, Matt, I don't know that really anyone has a good feel for his recruitment. I don't even know that if he has, that he really knows where he's really wanting to go at this point. I mean, he's going to have his announcement date in late November. I think it's right before Thanksgiving is when he's supposed to be announcing when he's where he's going to go. I almost wonder if he pushes it back a little bit more. I know we were talking in our group chat, and we mentioned the possibility of, Oklahoma has kind of gained some traction with him. I think OU, with the way their defense is played, although they didn't play very well this past weekend, but with that game notwithstanding, I mean they've shown improvement on defense this year. He would be a type of athlete that you don't typically see in Big 12 defenses, and I think say what you want about him. There's been a lot of discussion about Reggie Grimes, being better in in camp settings and things like that rather than in games. I still think he's got the ceiling to be a very good college player. It's just a matter of can he get developed? Can he get into the right position? Can he get to the right fit? I don't know. To me, with the defense Tennessee runs, I'll be curious to see what that right fit would entail, because I think he's a really good fit in a 4-3 defense. And Tennessee does play a lot of, 4-down linemen, or does play a lot of, they don't play exclusively out of the 3-4 a whole lot right now, because for one, they don't have the personnel, and for two, just kind of how defenses have to be run nowadays with teams being more pass happy. But I just, with Reggie, I think it might be a case of maybe he does have a little bit more of a, the underwear champions, what I call it, the guys who work out better in shorts and look better in shorts than they do on the field. Maybe he does have some of that, but I also think a lot of it has to do with, can he find the right fit, and where does he fit in best on the defense?
Yeah, I think that's a lot to do with it. I think there's a lot of spots that I think there's a lot of teams that Reggie Grimes can contribute right away on. I think there's some teams that Reggie Grimes is going to have to have some development on. I think there's multiple spots that Reggie Grimes can play. I think personally, from the little bit that I've saw him, I think he's a little bit better in a camp setting because he's a freak of nature athlete. Yeah. And that's what kind of, I think, makes the question more difficult, I guess you could say, is how can we turn away, a freak athlete at this point with what we have to replace on the defense? If a couple of tweaks could develop his game, because you hear guys all the time say, and that one coach did this for me, and it was just that simple. So, I don't know. There's a lot of questions out there left about Reggie Grimes, but I think Oklahoma would be an exceptional fit for him. I think he would be really good in a Big 12 setting, in a 4-3 setting with Alex Grinch coaching him. I think it could be a really good fit, and I think Oklahoma's going to let that be known. They don't get a lot of big-time defenders, so we'll see what happens there, but I think Oklahoma's really going to be a player, and I'm not sure what Tennessee's going to elect to do, but we'll know something more within the next couple of weeks, obviously.
All right, we've got one last topic we really want to cover here in this podcast. Like I said, I apologize for this one being a little bit shorter, but with just being Matt and I both having to kind of go, it just is what it is. But one of the big things I want to talk about is Tennessee does have some visitors coming in this weekend. I think we mentioned last podcast of some of the guys coming in, but Kyrie Miller, who is an offensive lineman who Tennessee has targeted and who they very much like, he couldn't make it in this past weekend for South Carolina, but he informed me that he will actually be in town this weekend for the UAB game. So he will be back. He'll be in here. He had something come up with his family where he couldn't make it in to Knoxville for the South Carolina game, but he will be in town on his visit for the UAB game. Tennessee's going to have a lot of other visitors, not just in 2020 class, but they're going to have several 2021 and 22 guys coming in. I think they're even going to have a couple 23 kids coming in for this game. But one of the main ones, probably the biggest one of the 2020 class who's come in here that's getting the most attention because of his ranking, is 4-star Desmond Tisdale, who is a linebacker / running back out of Georgia, plays down in Wilcox County, down in Rochelle, Georgia. He released a list of top schools back in the beginning of August, and it kind of looked like maybe a decision might be coming soon for him. His top schools at that point were Auburn, Florida, South Carolina, Georgia Tech, Nebraska, Troy, and Georgia Southern. And he's got offers from several different SEC schools. Those I mentioned there. He also has offers from Ole Miss and Kentucky, along with the ones I just mentioned. But now Tennessee offered him, Matt, they offered him a week ago, and I remember texting you guys saying, why did they wait so long to offer this kid? I mean, he's a 4-star down in Georgia, but I know he doesn't play in he's a 4-star in Georgia, but at the same time he plays, I think, in the single A in Georgia, but still, single A football in Georgia is still better than a lot of other, classifications in a lot of other states. So yeah, take maybe some of his highlights with a grain of salt, but at the same time, watching his film, to me, he stands out maybe even more as a running back than as a linebacker. I think he has some really good skills as a linebacker, but he really can run the ball. He gets an offer from Tennessee last week. He announces this week via Twitter that he's going to be taking a visit to Knoxville this weekend. So you have a very quick kind of, interest. I mean, it wasn't just the thing that Tennessee just contacted him recently. I was browsing through his Twitter. I've tried to get an interview with him, and he has so far been non-responsive. But just kind of looking through his Twitter over the last couple months, Tennessee's been sending him stuff, some little social media package things, some little graphics and stuff like that, for at least for a little bit now. So it's been a case where they've been in contact with them, but he didn't have an official offer to recently. Now he's gotten the offer. Now he's coming in for a visit. What does this tell you, Matt, about not only his recruitment, but also what Tennessee may be doing with other guys on their board at certain positions at this point too?
I have yet to reach out to Tisdale. I'm I need to do that. For me, I personally agree with you on the running back side of things.
Mm-hmm.
I think Tennessee may end up, stealing this kid as a running back if they really, make a push. He's kind of a little bit of a tweener as far as the linebacker position goes.
Yeah.
A little smaller, 6 foot 215. But he's flashy as, a running back. So I'm interested to see what happens. I want to see how this visit goes, what they tell him more on this visit, when they can sit him down. And, I'm sure that they will try to extend this visit. He's coming from about 7 hours away.
Yeah, it's not super close.
Yeah, so it's a pretty big visit to get him up there. So I'm sure they'll try to extend that visit out as much of the weekend as they can. So with that being said, I kind of want to see what they tell him coming out of the visit. I want to see what his interest is in Tennessee as well. But I feel like that he could. I feel like some other schools are holding off on him because of the tweener thing as well, and maybe seeing what they want to do or what they do at the position. So I think there's an opportunity for Tennessee to make a move here. I think it's just going to depend on how they handle it, and if they're the first school to offer him as a running back and that appeals to him, well, he's not going to go to Auburn probably and join their running back class, and South Carolina already has a 5-star committed as a running back.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest competition. Tennessee could make some headway with him and his parents coming out of the weekend. So we'll see what happens there. But he's a big time visitor to get up there. And another one that is coming in from a good little ways away is RJ Adams. We talked about him a little bit yesterday. Broke an article on him that he was coming down for a visit, and he's really coming down to check some boxes. He wants to see how this offensive line performs. He wants to see how this team performs. He wants to see what the atmosphere's like. He's already been to campus. He enjoys Knoxville. He thinks he could, it's only a few hours from his house. He's very interested in playing in the SEC. All of his teammates that have come out of Woodbridge have gone to the SEC. I think he sees that as a measuring stick. I think that could help Tennessee in the long run if they elect to push for him. But he's a big offensive lineman. That's rated as a 4-star on Rivals and 247, and is rated as high as the number 12 guard on Rivals. So Tennessee's having, the success is finally building back up, and they're getting some more big-time visitors onto campus late in the cycle that we haven't heard about, that we're having to do a little bit of work on, and it kind of catches everybody by surprise, but it's a good thing as well.
It also shows that this staff does a really good job of keeping things kind of close to the vest with recruiting.
Yeah, they do an excellent job.
Yeah, there's not been nearly as much that's kind of come out about that. There's not like there's a ton of leaks and stuff with the previous staff either, but this one specifically with Pruitt and his staff, there's not really been a whole lot of leaks and stuff about guys on. Last year you saw a little bit. I think it was I don't remember when it was. It was in the kind of winter when Crouch came in on a kind of a secret visit, and it kind of got out a little bit. But even that was, there were multiple times last year where you had Darnell Wright coming in on visits and people didn't know about it. I mean, he was here. He was in Knoxville a lot more than
he was in Knoxville so much.
Yeah.
And they did that with Eric Gilbert over the summer too. I mean, when people really thought that Tennessee was trending, there was a lot of reason why behind the scene. Georgia hadn't got him on campus in months, and Tennessee had secretly had him on at least twice. So it goes a long way when you can keep things quiet like that. You can keep other coaching staffs from applying as much pressure. So it's a pretty good tactic.
Yep, and I mean Henry To'oTo'o's recruitment is another kind of point to that too. I mean, it didn't seem like Tennessee was in it the whole time, but they didn't really have the momentum until kind of the end there. But they were in it the whole time, and that was another thing you talked about Niedermeyer earlier with Ojulari. I mean, Niedermeyer was obviously very crucial. And that one, Niedermeyer is going to be very crucial, and for Tennessee and a lot of these guys moving forward in this 2020 class too. And I think RJ Adams is very intriguing. It seems Tennessee is very much not done with their interior of the line in this class because they've already got 2 guys committed, but they're, as you mentioned, they're having RJ Adams come in. They're targeting Kyrie Miller, who I wonder, to me, Jim Chaney giving him the official offer means that they're definitely pursuing him as an offensive lineman, but I almost wonder if he gets to campus, if maybe look at him on the defensive line, but I think he's obviously going to get his first look on the O-line because Chaney's the one who gave him the offer, over the phone and stuff, and I think they're almost exclusively looking at him as a guard right now on the offensive side of the ball, but it very much appears that they are, not done with bringing in a more interior lineman. And I think that makes sense because that's kind of the area you're going to be losing more guys here soon, because Trey Smith's a junior. I mean, he could go pro this year. I don't know if he will or not. It would kind of depend on what he hears back from, health-wise. But you have him, and then you have Brandon Kennedy. I mean, maybe he gets a 6th year and comes up next year, but there's no guarantee of that. And then Jamari Johnson's played inside, but he's been playing tackle this year. So you have him gone. Ryan Locklear is older. Ryan Johnson's older. So you need some help on the interior. So it makes sense to why they'll bring in, more guys.
Yep. They're going to bring in some guys, and there's going to be some guys that pop up late. Again, like Miller. I think they've liked Miller for a long time. I don't think they wanted to tell anybody that they liked Miller for a long time, though.
Yeah.
They recruited Ty Jordan, and they've stayed in contact with Miller. Mm-hmm. They go to the same school, so they obviously have watched Miller run block enough to know what he brings to the table. They haven't lost anybody on the offensive line to create any desperation. And, there's no real signs that they're going to lose anybody on the offensive line as far as in this current class. So they do a really good job of keeping stuff close to the vest. And when Brian Niedermeyer gets on a plane and starts going west, you better watch out, because he's usually bringing a couple of recruits with him. I mean, it goes back to, Jameer Johnson and Dominic Wood Anderson. He went out there and got them. He went out there and got Henry. He went out there and recruited some guys that he kept Tennessee alive on late in the cycle last year, and he's going to do the same thing with probably Noah Sewell and Darnell Washington this year, as far as at least giving Tennessee a puncher's chance. So this staff can recruit.
Yeah, that's one area I definitely do not question them on, is their recruiting. There are a lot of other areas they're really good at, obviously, too, at least from what they're showing so far. But I think that'll be where we go ahead and end this podcast. But Brandon, that's the second time I've done that. Matt, before we really do end it, you plugged earlier the stuff about RJ Adams. What else do you all have going on with Vol Recruiting Reports, and where all can our listeners who, if they haven't already followed you guys, where else can they follow you?
Yeah, so go follow us on Twitter @_VR2_. Hit us on Facebook and Instagram @Vol Recruiting Reports. So really what we have going on this week is we have several games that we'll be at this week. I'll be at McCallie and Innsworth. More than likely that's at McCallie. Go down and see Jay Hardy. Keyshawn Lawrence coming close to home, so that's a good opportunity for me. Dale will be in Fort Payne, Alabama. James Robinson is coming up to play there, which is as close as we were going to catch him this year. We were going down there regardless, but that was as close as we were going to catch him, and it's only about an hour out of Chattanooga, so not bad there. Brandon will be in Memphis, more than likely to see Briarcrest versus Memphis University, which will put Marcus Henderson versus Omari Thomas, and he could switch that to Whitehaven, though. It just depends. We were trying to gauge interest and see if Tennessee's doing anything with Darren Turner, but right now Briarcrest is the plan. And then David May, who has been helping us out in the Nashville area, will be somewhere probably at Ravenwood to see Reggie Grimes, or maybe Brentwood Academy. I'm not sure where David's going. But, yeah, get over there, check us out for that stuff. Be sure to follow us ahead of time, because we'll be live from Jay Hardy's commitment next Wednesday. So, we've got some stuff coming down the pipe, and then, signing period's getting ready to come up pretty soon, so we'll be hitting the road pretty quick.
Yeah, that's only a month and a half-ish away.
Yeah.
Good Lord. That's weird to think about.
Yeah, it is.
Well, I appreciate you joining me this week, Matt, on the podcast. Hopefully next week we'll have Matt and Brandon both on the RTI and VR2 Recruiting Podcast. We appreciate all of you who tune in and listen every week and interact with us. You can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts. You can get it on your Android device as well. We're on YouTube. That's the way a lot of you listen to the RTI podcast. That's the way I think a lot of you also listen to this one. So you subscribe to us on YouTube and watch the video and interact and leave comments there. And you can go to RockyTopInsider.com, click on the podcast tab, listen to it straight from there, or download it straight from there as well. Signing off for Matt, I am Nathaniel. Thank you all so much, and this has been another episode of the RTI and VR2 Recruiting Podcast.